The first plasma bolt struck Tokyo at 3:47 hours GMT, turning the Shibuya crossing into a molten crater of liquefied concrete and vaporized steel. Commander Zax of the Kraxan Imperium watched the orbital bombardment through the crystalline viewscreen of the battle cruiser Decimator, his six-fingered hands clasped behind a back covered in iridescent scale armor. "Commence primary bombardment sequence," he ordered, his translator rendering the command in a dozen human languages. The strategy was simple: crush the major population centers, eliminate command structures, and demonstrate the futility of resistance. Intelligence reports had been crystal clear. Humans were a fractured species, more likely to turn on each other than mount a unified defense. In Tokyo, Mai Chen's world exploded. The basement laboratory of the Advanced Robotics Institute disappeared in a hurricane of debris and plasma fire. Prototype neural-linked drone systems crashed to the floor, circuits sparking. Outside, the iconic pedestrian crossing, once a symbol of human connectivity, became a landscape of molten glass and burning wreckage. Mai didn't panic. She'd been preparing for something like this her entire life. Her fingers, already moving with practiced precision, began reconnecting severed circuits. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes remained focused. Around her, the ruins of her lab told a story of interrupted brilliance. Modular robotic systems, quantum communication prototypes, adaptive AI networks, all designed for a moment just like this. Halfway across the world, in the Pentagon's Emergency Command Center, General Sarah Lockhart watched multiple screens dissolve into static. Satellite after satellite went dark. Communication networks collapsed. The initial strikes had been devastating, targeting not just cities, but the invisible infrastructure that held modern civilization together. "Status report," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. A young communications specialist looked up, his face pale. "Multiple major cities are gone. New York, Tokyo, London, Moscow. All primary targets have been hit. Casualty estimates are in the millions." General Lockhart's hand clenched into a fist. The Kraxan had made a fundamental mistake. They believed destruction would break humanity. Instead, they were about to light a fire. In Singapore, a network of quantum computing centers came online simultaneously. In a basement in Sao Paulo, a group of teenage hackers began coordinating through an encrypted mesh network. In the Canadian wilderness, military communication bunkers that had been preparing for this moment since the Cold War activated their backup systems. Commander Zax continued to watch, confident in the Kraxan's technological superiority. The plasma bombardment represented only the first phase, a demonstration of power intended to crush human resistance before the ground invasion began. What he didn't see was the network forming beneath the smoke and chaos. Humanity wasn't dying. It was transforming. Mai Chen looked up from her destroyed lab, a network of newly reconnected circuits humming to life around her. A series of modified drones, originally designed for urban search and rescue, began to power up. Their optical sensors swept the destruction, gathering data, preparing. The first true response to the alien invasion wasn't a weapon. It was information. Outside, Tokyo burned. But in this basement, something else was being born, a distributed intelligence that the Kraxan could never comprehend. May's lips curled into a slight smile. They thought this was an invasion. She knew it was an opportunity. The real war was just beginning. The underground bunker beneath Cheyenne Mountain trembled with each distant explosion. Jack Rodriguez moved between banks of monitors, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that should have been impossible to assemble so quickly. But humanity had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone realized. "Patch me through to Singapore," he commanded. A young communications specialist, barely 23, with neural interface implants glinting behind her ear, nodded. The world might be burning, but communication was their first weapon. Dr. Aisha Patel's face flickered onto the main screen. Her quantum computing lab in Singapore had survived the initial strikes through a combination of underground infrastructure and adaptive shielding. Behind her, robotic systems were already reassembling damaged equipment, each machine moving with an almost organic precision. "We've got a partial network," Aisha reported, her voice calm despite the chaos. "The Kraxen's communication jamming is sophisticated, but not unbreakable. They're using a hierarchical encryption model that assumes a centralized communication structure." Jack's lips quirked into a smile. "They don't understand how we communicate." Across the globe, survivors were doing something the Kraxen invasion plans had never anticipated. They weren't panicking. They weren't breaking down. They were connecting. In a makeshift command center cobbled together from the ruins of a community college in Brazil, a team of former game developers, cybersecurity experts, and military veterans worked feverishly. They were building something the Kraxen could never comprehend, a communication network that wasn't a network at all, but a living, breathing organism of human determination. Maria Rodriguez, no relation to Jack, but sharing his last name by pure coincidence, had been a competitive esports player before the invasion. Now her skills in managing complex, fast-moving information streams became a weapon. She coordinated drone swarms using techniques she'd learned from years of real-time strategy games, each autonomous unit moving with a collective intelligence that defied traditional military doctrine. "They're looking for centralized command," Jack muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "But we don't have a center to hit." The Kraxen invasion strategy had been perfect. If they were fighting any other species in the galaxy, they had studied humanity's conflicts, its political divisions, its technological infrastructure. They believed they understood humans. They were wrong. In the first 6 hours after the initial strike, something unprecedented happened. Military commanders shared classified information through channels the Kraxen couldn't track. Tech companies that had been competitors seconds before began sharing resources. Universities opened their research databases. Every piece of human knowledge became a potential weapon. A satellite network, originally designed for global internet access, transformed into a distributed communication and targeting system. Cellular networks, fought destroyed, began operating through mesh communication techniques that bypassed traditional infrastructure. Even the internet, once considered a potential vulnerability, became an adaptive, self-healing organism of information and resistance. "We're not just fighting," Aisha said, her voice carrying a note of something between excitement and ruthless determination. "We're evolving." Jack watched the screens. Tactical information flowed like water. Unpredictable, adaptive, impossible to contain. The Kraxen had expected a conventional military response. Instead, they faced something far more dangerous. They faced humanity. In basements, bunkers, hidden research facilities, and improvised command centers, the real invasion was just beginning. And humanity was ready. More than ready. Eager. The Tesla Gigafactory in Shanghai had never been designed for war. 60 hours ago, it was a marvel of electric vehicle production. Now, it was humanity's most advanced weapons foundry. Mai Chen stood at the center of controlled chaos, her neural interface connecting her directly to the factory's adaptive manufacturing systems. Around her, robotic arms that once assembled sleek electric cars now constructed something entirely different. Autonomous combat drones took shape with terrifying speed, each one a hybrid of consumer technology and military-grade innovation. "Speed is our weapon," she muttered, watching as the first batch of drones completed their initial assembly. Traditional military thinking required months of testing, weeks of refinement. Humanity didn't have that luxury. So they improvised. In Silicon Valley, what remained of the tech industry's most brilliant minds worked in continuous shifts. Mike Zhang, a 42-year-old AI researcher who'd survived the initial bombardment, had transformed his startup's machine learning laboratory into a weapon design center. Algorithms originally created for natural language processing now calculated optimal drone swarm tactics. Neural networks designed to predict consumer behavior now predicted alien military movements. "We're not building weapons," Mike told his team, his eyes burning with an almost manic intensity. "We're building adaptive intelligence." Across the world, similar transformations were happening. In Singapore, 3D printing farms began manufacturing exotic alloy components that would have taken traditional manufacturers years to develop. A network of universities became a distributed research facility, with professors and students sharing breakthroughs in real time. The Kraxan had studied human military history. They understood conventional warfare. They knew about tanks, aircraft, traditional weapon systems. What they couldn't comprehend was how quickly humans could turn anything, literally anything, into a potential weapon. Mi's breakthrough came during the third day of the invasion. The neural link combat system she'd been developing transformed every piece of technology into a potential instrument of war. Household robots became reconnaissance units. Smart home systems became communication relays. Even children's toys could be repurposed into micro-surveillance devices. In the Canadian wilderness, a group of former telecommunications engineers had established a communication hub that would have been impossible to detect. Using a combination of quantum encryption, mesh networking, and adaptive frequency hopping, they created a communication system that was less a network and more a living, breathing organism of information. "The Kraxan are looking for signals," Jack Rodriguez explained during a global strategy meeting conducted entirely through encrypted quantum channels. "We're not sending signals. We're becoming the signal." The weapons they were creating defied conventional understanding. A drone wasn't just a flying machine. It was a distributed intelligence that could learn, adapt, and coordinate with other units in milliseconds. A smartphone wasn't just a communication device. It was a potential hacking platform, a navigation system, a targeting computer. Manufacturing had become weaponized creativity. In the ruins of a Silicon Valley research park, a group of teenage hackers managed to reprogram a fleet of food delivery robots. Within hours, these machines transformed into a sophisticated reconnaissance network, gathering critical intelligence about alien troop movements. Traditional military doctrine suggested specialization. Humans were doing the opposite. Every system could be anything. Every piece of technology was a potential weapon. The Kraxan watched their invasion plans dissolve in real time. They had prepared for a conventional war. Instead, they faced an entire species that was turning the entire concept of warfare into something completely unrecognizable. Mai Chen looked at the first completed batch of drones and smiled. They thought this was an invasion. Humanity was just getting started. Commander Zach stared at the communication screens with growing confusion. His most advanced psychological warfare algorithms were failing spectacularly. The human response defied every model in the Kraxan military database. One moment, intercepted human communication showed tactical military discussions. The next, they were broadcasting complex mathematical theorems. Then came streams of what appeared to be nonsensical internet memes, followed by intricate musical compositions, and suddenly rapid-fire lines of computer code that seemed to dance between multiple programming languages. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing across her lips. Her team of linguists, psychologists, mathematicians, and communication specialists had turned human unpredictability into a weapon more potent than any plasma cannon. "They're trying to understand us," she told Jack Rodriguez, who was monitoring the global communication networks. "But understanding isn't the same as predicting." The psychological assault began subtly. In the first days after the invasion, Kraxan communication channels became infected with what could only be described as organized chaos. Military-grade translation algorithms struggled to process information that seemed to follow no logical pattern. A team of internet meme creators, previously dismissed as digital entertainers, became critical components of the psychological warfare unit. They understood something fundamental about human communication that the Kraxan could never comprehend. Information isn't just about content. It's about context, emotion, and the ability to convey multiple layers of meaning simultaneously. One intercepted transmission showed a Kraxan analysis team completely bewildered. They had received a communication that contained a detailed mathematical proof, lyrics from an obscure 20th century pop song, quantum mechanical equations, a recipe for chocolate chip cookies, tactical military coordinates. The Kraxan AI systems couldn't process the seemingly random collection of information. But to humans, it was a perfectly coherent message, a multi-layered communication that carried both strategic information and a profound sense of human defiance. In the ruins of a communications research center in Brazil, Maria Rodriguez, the former esports player, had developed what her team called chaos protocols. Traditional military communication relied on clear, direct messaging. Her system did the opposite, creating communication patterns that were simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. "We're not hiding information," Maria explained during a global strategy meeting. "We're making it impossible to filter." The psychological warfare went deeper. Human teams began broadcasting everything from mathematical theorems to bizarre internet memes across Kraxan communication channels. Each transmission was a weapon, designed to overwhelm, confuse, and ultimately destabilize the alien communication networks. Kraxan military analysts watched in growing horror as their precise, hierarchical communication systems became infected with human unpredictability. Logic bombs turned military communication channels into white noise. Quantum encrypted messages carried multiple simultaneous meanings that no single translation algorithm could fully decode. Commander Zax reviewed the latest communication intercepts. What should have been a straightforward invasion had become something else entirely. The humans weren't just resisting. They were reimagining the entire concept of communication, warfare, and resistance. A transmission came through, seemingly random, but carrying a message that would haunt the Kraxan command. "Welcome to Earth. Game on." Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked at her team and nodded. The real invasion was just beginning. And humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was being wonderfully, unpredictably human. The farm in rural Iowa looked unremarkable. John Peterson, a third-generation farmer, stood beside a modified combine harvester that now bore little resemblance to its original agricultural purpose. GPS targeting systems originally designed for precision crop planting now guided makeshift missile launchers. Hydraulic systems meant for harvesting corn now controlled weapon deployment mechanisms. "Precision agriculture meets precision warfare," John muttered, adjusting a neural interface that connected his farming equipment to the global resistance network. Across the world, every surviving human became a potential combatant. In Tokyo, a group of former game designers repurposed their virtual reality simulation tools to create advanced training programs for drone operators. High school robotics clubs became impromptu weapon design centers. Makers, hackers, engineers, everyone had a role to play. Mai Chen's distributed drone network had become something more than a weapon system. It was a living, breathing intelligence that drew strength from every human it touched. Each drone was more than a machine. It was a node in a global nervous system of resistance. In the underground server farms of Silicon Valley, gaming communities that had once battled each other in virtual worlds now coordinated real-world resistance tactics. A professional StarCraft player named Alex Kim found his years of managing complex, fast-moving strategies translated perfectly to coordinating drone swarm tactics. Micromanagement skills honed in digital battlegrounds became critical in managing autonomous combat units. The Kraxan had studied human military history. They understood conventional warfare. What they couldn't comprehend was how quickly humans could turn anything, literally anything, into a potential weapon. A group of teenagers in Sao Paulo hacked a delivery robot network, transforming autonomous package delivery systems into a sophisticated reconnaissance platform. Each robot became a mobile sensor suite, gathering intelligence and transmitting data through encrypted mesh networks that seemed to phase in and out of existence. In the Canadian wilderness, a team of former telecommunications engineers had established a communication hub that defied traditional understanding. Using quantum encryption and adaptive frequency hopping, they created a communication system that was less a network and more a living, breathing organism of information. Jack Rodriguez watched the global resistance take shape. This wasn't a traditional military response. This was something entirely new, a distributed intelligence that drew strength from human creativity, adaptability, and sheer determination. "We're not an army," he told Dr. Elena Rodriguez during the encrypted quantum communication briefing. "We're an ecosystem. Every surviving piece of technology became a potential weapon. Smart home systems transformed into communication relays. Industrial 3D printers became weapon component factories. Even children's toys could be repurposed into micro-surveillance devices. A retired auto manufacturing plant in Detroit became a weapon foundry that would have been impossible to imagine days earlier. Robotic assembly lines that once created luxury vehicles now constructed autonomous combat systems. Each production line was a testament to human adaptability, turning consumer technology into instruments of survival. The most terrifying weapon wasn't a piece of technology. It was the human capacity to reimagine possibility. In the ruins of a research park, a group of neuroscientists discovered they could use modified neural interface technology to create a distributed intelligence network. Humans weren't just fighting. They were becoming something more, a collective intelligence that the Kraxen couldn't comprehend. Commander Zax reviewed the latest intelligence reports. What should have been a straightforward invasion had become a nightmare of unpredictability. The humans weren't just resisting. They were transforming. And they were just getting started. The first true human counteroffensive looked nothing like any military action in galactic history. It began with silence. Complete, absolute silence across all traditional communication channels. The Kraxen battle networks, expecting the usual patterns of resistance, found themselves staring into an impossible void. No radio transmissions, no electronic signatures, no heat signatures, nothing. Then everything happened at once. Orbital platforms that seemed to materialize from nowhere began their assault. These weren't traditional weapons. They were repurposed communication satellites, scientific research platforms, and even weather monitoring systems, transformed into precision strike platforms that moved with a fluidity that defied traditional combat algorithms. Jack Rodriguez coordinated from a mobile command center that was never in the same location for more than 17 minutes. His team included specialists who had never met in person, a network of hackers, mathematicians, former military strategists, and technological innovators connected through quantum encrypted channels that the Kraxen couldn't even detect, let alone intercept. Mai Chen's drone swarms were the first wave. They moved like liquid mercury, each autonomous unit part of a collective intelligence that learned and adapted faster than any centralized command could comprehend. One moment, they were a defensive screen. The next, they became a precision strike force that could reconfigure its entire tactical approach in milliseconds. "We're not fighting like them," Mai explained to Jack during a briefing. "We're fighting like us." In the Canadian wilderness, a team of quantum computing experts had developed a communication system that was less a network and more a living, breathing organism of information. Their breakthrough allowed for communication that existed simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a method of coordination that the hierarchical Kraxen military structure couldn't begin to understand. The strike teams were equally unconventional. A former professional esports player coordinated drone swarms using tactics developed in virtual battle arenas. A group of teenage hackers turned delivery robot networks into sophisticated reconnaissance platforms. Farmers modified agricultural equipment into makeshift weapons platforms. Every human became a potential combatant. Every piece of technology a potential weapon. Commander Zax watched in growing horror as his invasion plans dissolved in real time. The human response defied every military model in the Kraxen database. They weren't fighting a conventional war. They were reimagining the entire concept of conflict. The quantum communication network developed by Dr. Aisha Patel allowed for tactical coordination that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Information moved in patterns that were simultaneously a message, a weapon, and a method of concealment. Each transmission carried multiple layers of meaning. Tactical information hidden within seemingly random data streams. "We're not hiding," Jack told his team. "We're making it impossible to understand." Orbital strikes came from platforms that shouldn't exist. Weapon systems materialized from what appeared to be civilian infrastructure. The Krexan discovered that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to transform anything, literally anything, into a potential instrument of war. A fleet of repurposed commercial spacecraft became precision strike platforms. Agricultural drones became reconnaissance units. Smart home systems became communication relays. The line between civilian and military technology disappeared completely. Commander Zax reviewed the latest intelligence reports. What should have been a straightforward invasion had become a nightmare of unpredictability. The humans weren't just resisting. They were rewriting the entire concept of warfare. And they were just getting started. The final assault was pure human chaos. Commander Zax watched his millennia-old military structure crumble in real time. What had begun as a simple planetary conquest had transformed into humanity's most devastating counterattack. The Krexan Imperium's strategic algorithms couldn't process the fundamental truth becoming clear with each passing moment. Humans didn't fight like any other species in the galaxy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the Global Command Center, a network of quantum-encrypted communication systems surrounding her. Her team wasn't just coordinating a military response. They were conducting a complete dismantling of an interstellar civilization. "We're not destroying them," she told Jack Rodriguez. "We're unraveling them." The attack came from everywhere and nowhere. Repurposed communication satellites became precision strike platforms. Quantum communication networks allowed for tactical coordination that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Each transmission carried multiple layers of meaning. Tactical information hidden within seemingly random data streams. Mai Chen's distributed drone network had become something far beyond a weapon system. It was a living, breathing intelligence that drew strength from every human it touched. The drones moved with a fluidity that made traditional military formations look like primitive stone tools. One moment, they were a defensive screen. The next, they became a precision strike force that could reconfigure its entire tactical approach in milliseconds. In the ruins of Silicon Valley, a group of former tech workers had transformed an abandoned research facility into the most advanced tactical coordination center in human history. Gaming specialists who once designed virtual world strategies now managed real-world combat networks. Data scientists who once predicted consumer behavior now predicted alien military movements with terrifying accuracy. The Krexan discovered that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to transform anything, literally anything, into a potential instrument of war. Agricultural drones became reconnaissance units. Smart home systems became communication relays. Delivery robots transformed into mobile weapons platforms. The line between civilian and military technology disappeared completely. Jack Rodriguez coordinated through a communication system that was less a network and more a living, breathing organism of information. No central command to target. No single strategy to counter. Each human became a potential combatant. Each piece of technology, a potential weapon. Commander Zax's tactical displays became a nightmare of impossible movements and unpredictable strikes. The humans weren't following any known military doctrine. They were rewriting the entire concept of warfare in real time. A team of neuroscientists had discovered they could use modified neural interface technology to create a distributed intelligence network. Humans weren't just fighting. They were becoming something more. A collective intelligence that the Krexan couldn't comprehend. The final blow came from an unexpected source. A group of teenagers in Sao Paulo managed to infiltrate the Krexan's central communication network using a combination of quantum encryption, adaptive AI, and what could only be described as digital guerrilla warfare. They didn't just breach the system, they'd rewrote it from the inside out. "We're not destroying them," Mei Chen explained during a global strategy meeting. "We're teaching them a lesson." The Kraxan military leadership watched in horror as their entire communication infrastructure collapsed. It wasn't a traditional defeat. It was a complete unraveling of everything they understood about warfare, communication, and civilization. Commander Zax made one final transmission before the complete system collapse. It was a message that would be studied by civilizations for generations. Humanity is not a species, it is a force of nature. And then silence. The silence after the invasion was unlike anything in galactic history. Mei Chen stood at the window of the rebuilt Tokyo Research Center, watching automated reconstruction drones move across the cityscape. Where others saw destruction, she saw opportunity. The Kraxan invasion had done something no other event in human history had managed. It had unified the entire planet. Dr. Elinga Rodriguez compiled the final report. It wasn't a military document. It was a message to the universe. The statistical analysis was staggering. Humanity had not just survived an invasion. They had completely dismantled an interstellar civilization that had existed for millennia. Every major technological breakthrough, every strategic innovation, had emerged from the most unexpected sources: teenage hackers, retired farmers, gaming specialists, stay-at-home parents. The most advanced weapon system was human creativity itself. Jack Rodriguez oversaw the global reconstruction efforts. But this wasn't about rebuilding. It was about reimagining. Quantum communication networks that had been developed during the invasion now connected every corner of the planet. The traditional barriers between nations, between disciplines, between people had dissolved completely. The Kraxan had intended to destroy humanity. Instead, they had forged the most unified human civilization in history. In the Canadian wilderness, the quantum computing team that had been critical to the resistance now turned its attention to solving global challenges: climate restoration, energy production, medical breakthroughs. The same adaptive intelligence that had defeated the Kraxan now focused on humanity's greatest challenges. The first interstellar message was simple. Transmitted across multiple frequencies, in multiple languages, it carried a message that would echo through galactic history. We are humanity. This is our planet. Do not try again. Scientific outposts began studying the technological artifacts left behind by the Kraxan invasion. Each piece of alien technology became a learning opportunity. Where other species might have been content to reverse engineer, humans began to completely reimagine the fundamental principles behind the technology. Mei Chen's drone networks, initially developed as a weapon, now became the foundation of a global environmental restoration project. The same adaptive intelligence that had coordinated combat now mapped ecosystem recovery, managed agricultural production, and monitored global climate systems. The teenagers who had been critical to the resistance were now being recruited by top research institutions, military think tanks, and global innovation centers. The invasion had revealed a fundamental truth about humanity. Every individual was a potential solution, every challenge an opportunity for innovation. Dr. Aisha Patel's quantum communication research transformed global infrastructure. The same networks that had confounded the Kraxan now connected researchers, educators, and innovators across the planet. Information flowed like a living organism, breaking down the traditional barriers between disciplines. Jack Rodriguez looked at the global reconstruction plans. This wasn't about returning to what was. It was about becoming something entirely new. The first interstellar diplomatic mission was nothing like traditional first contacts. It was a demonstration, a message carried not through words, but through action. Here was a species that had transformed a potential extinction event into an opportunity for growth. Mei Chen's final report to the Global Research Council captured the essence of what had happened. The Kraxan thought they were invading a planet. They didn't realize they were challenging a force of nature. In research facilities, reconstruction sites, and community centers around the world, a new understanding was taking shape. The invasion hadn't been a tragedy. It had been humanity's ultimate opportunity. The universe had just learned a lesson. Never underestimate humans.